Hey folks, you're about to witness history in the making. I'm going to do my first and last video blog, or vlog, right here before your very eyes with nothing up my sleeves but a loosely crafted text and a public speaker's script sheet. Now, vlogging is a kind of performance art type of thing that's all too prevalent here on YouTube. But you have to do at least one before you pack it all in and move on to the next world or video sharing site. Not that I have any intentions of doing either in the near or even distant future. I say this is my first but also my last vlog for reasons that will be abundantly and painfully made clear to you as I continue. But I'll do my best to move through it as quickly as I can to spare both of us the agony and the annoyance. So let's get started, shall we? My brother Joe and I went to Manhattan this past Saturday and attended a roundtable discussion presented by the Helix Center for Interdisciplinary Investigation held at the New York Psychoanalytic Society and Institute on East 82nd Street. Now, the title of the talk was billed as When Philosophy Meets Mathematics Meets Neuroscience, or What Mathematics Can Teach Us About the Mind/Brain, or how cutting-edge mathematical models are elucidating the computational rules encoding brain functions and the implications this carries for a deeper understanding of the mind. And it promised to be a remarkable gathering of leading thinkers in this field, which in fact it was. So how could we resist? How could we pass up the opportunity to gain some rare insight into the inner computational workings of our own brains, and most especially to gain a better understanding of just how and maybe why it is we sometimes say and think and do the stupid things we sometimes say and think and do. Now, with all the advances in high-tech imaging that have been and are being developed today, CT scans, PET scans, SPECT, MRI, fMRI, DTI, etc., it seems the holy grail of mapping the complex anatomic and functional wiring system of the human brain is almost beginning to look feasible. We're hearing more and more about the results of the Human Connectome project as it advances to its third year of operations, just as we did with the Human Genome or Genome project during the 1990s and the opening years of this new century. From the latter, we learned that there are about 20,000 protein-coding genes dispersed among the 23 chromosome pairs in human beings, the same range of genes as found in mice and ringworms. So genetically, at least, we don't seem to be the apple of nature's eye. If I may shift to maize for a moment, M-A-I-Z-E, what you call corn, so far, by contrast, its B73 line's 2.3 billion base sequence contains more than 32,000 protein-coding genes, all neatly spread across only 10 chromosomes, or so I have been told. I say this merely to be sensationalistic and simplistic, not to score any reliable or revelatory scientific points. Still, though the human genome has been completely read by DNA sequencing, we're very far from understanding what any of it means. So let's move on and consider our species in the more salient and self-aggrandizing category of brain. Now, here's a different story altogether. What, we might ask along with Shakespeare, what exactly accounts for this godlike quintessence of dust that seems to reside between our ears? We're told we have 80 to 100 billion neurons. That's billion, a la Carl Sagan. 80 to 100 billion neurons, each with as many as 10,000 synapses, resulting in an incredibly complex network with well over 100 trillion cellular connections. So it looks like coming up with a complete human connectome is likely to take considerably more than the 5 years originally allocated to this rather ambitious endeavor. But even if we do develop a functional wiring diagram of all these connections, that won't even begin to scratch the surface of, say, David Chalmers' hard problem when trying to understand our wonderful and wacky minds. How mere electrochemical processes of even so many massively connected cells could give rise to thought, feelings, dreams, creativity, poetry, music, mathematics, science, religion, self-reflection, that feeling we have and call qualia, and all the rest of the neat stuff our brains do on conscious, unconscious, metacognitive, and affective levels, well, it all defies my poor capacity to comprehend. It may be as Gary Kasparov observed in 1997 after finally being defeated by Deep Blue, during what I like to call his balk in New York, that infamous magnificent man versus monstrous machine chess match. And here I can't recall his exact words, so I'll just make them up as I go along. He said something like, quantity, when sufficiently multiplied, can in time and circumstance give rise to quality. And though this concept has been kicked around since Hegel and probably long before him, it's interesting to know that Kasparov, after losing game 2 of this second match, reported that he sometimes saw deep intelligence, and even creativity in the computer program's moves, suggesting not that Deep Blue was poised to conquer the world we know and love, enslaving all humanity, or keeping only those of us alive that could serve its long-term maintenance needs, but that IBM was cheating, which of course they vehemently denied. Still, they refused Kasparov a third deciding match and instead disassembled the computer in what I would hate to think was a dark and desperate deed clandestinely performed under the covering shroud of blackest night. Now that last may just well be my actual though humble opinion, or it could be a simple exercise in the rhetorical art of apophasis, or more likely just my idiosyncratic way of poking fun. So where does this all leave us anyway? Archimedes once said, give me a place to stand and with my lever for you Brits, I will move the earth. Unfortunately, no such idealized platform exists. That is, we cannot step outside of human experience and consciousness in order to observe, objectify, and run so-called empirical tests on it. We can only do it from within, with all the pitfalls, blind spots, insights, and advantages our unique, exceptional, limited human perspective on reality presents to us, Descartes notwithstanding. In more concise formulation, we are the observed we would observe, with all the quantum fluctuations, uncertainty, and entanglements that evokes. Add to this the fact that knowledge itself behaves like a lover with a near paralyzing, if not pathological, fear of intimacy. That is, just when you think you're closest to her, she suddenly and inexplicably draws even further away, leaving you to question whether or not you ever knew the slightest thing about her in the first place. Still, the courtship must go on. Now, if it seems to you that I'm jumping all over the place, not even attempting to organize my thoughts or hold them in my short-term memory a millisecond longer than it takes to conjure up and utter a simple sentence, then you'd be right. But this is not merely an indication of my own clinically diagnosed, highly personalized brand of ADD, but more a reflection of the collective form of attention deficit the panel seemed to exhibit on Saturday, as they lacked the discipline and focus one would have liked to have seen supplied by the executive powers of something prefrontal, like, say, a moderator. Mathematical modeling, the billed star of the show, was well represented by a highly esteemed expert in the field, but barely got a word in edgewise, being nearly entirely drowned out by the noisy and dissonant feedback loops of all the philosophical, psychological, and historically tainted chatter that was bouncing all about the room. So excuse the rough and choppy rapids of my roaring, raging stream of consciousness. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how things seemed to me to go. On the positive side, I have to say that though our experience of this roundtable raised exponentially far more questions than it could ever possibly have hoped to answer, it was an intellectually stimulating way to pass a Saturday afternoon. I thoroughly recommend whatever future programs the Helix Center has, with the best of all intentions, seen fit to include on its fall schedule. After hearing this particular talk, my mind was fired up for the rest of the day and evening, and that alone was worth the price of admission, which, by the way, was free. I guess more excitatory chemicals were being exchanged between my pre- and postsynaptic cells than inhibitory. But the downside for me personally was that when it came time for bed, I had trouble sleeping even after taking 3 milligrams of melatonin. And even after tediously counting the endless web of entangled neurons in the Broca's area of my inferior frontal gyrus for well over 2 hours. But then, out of nowhere, sprang, as if by magic, rhyming heroic couplets in iambic pentameter, of a little poem I first heard in sophomore year of high school while daydreaming my way through a survey course in English literature based on one of Norton's super thick anthologies, bounding over 1,000 pages of cellulose fibers that had been pressed and ironed toilet paper thin. A whole nother lifetime ago. And these unprompted, though welcome, once potentiated linguistic concepts suddenly materialized in the seeming infinite subcortical vault of my left hemisphere's overactivated hippocampus, and compassionately and drowsily carried me off through high, ephemeral, golden gilded gates into the all-healing, organizing, reconstituting kingdom of great and mighty Morpheus, revered god of dreams, prophecy, and sleep. They were from Alexander Pope's essay on man. And with his thoughtful words, I'll end this, my first and certain to be final little vlog. Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man. Placed on this isthmus of a middle state, of being darkly wise and rudely great. With too much knowledge for the skeptic's side, with too much weakness for the stoic's pride, he hangs between. In doubt to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or beast. In doubt his mind or body to prefer, born but to die and reasoning but to err. Alike in ignorance his reason such, whether he thinks too little or too much. Chaos of thought and passion, all confused, still by himself abused or disabused. Created half to rise and half to fall. Great Lord of all things, yet a prey to all. Sole judge of truth, in endless error hurled. The glory, jest, and riddle of the world. Be well and keep on keeping on. I think I can scratch this off my bucket list.